Welcome back to the Your Project Shepherd Construction Podcast. I'm your host, Curtis Lawson. Thanks for joining us again. Last week we ended with Brian and Heather closing on their new property, which they intended to tear down to make room for their new build. They talked to a friend who recently built a semi-custom home in the suburbs that it should take 6 or 9 months to finish this process, so they held off on listing their current home for a while. They've got enough money in their cash reserves to last for about a year, plus Brian usually gets a nice end-of-year bonus at work. So now they're ready to take these plans and put them into action. They got a $15,000 quote to tear down the existing house, plus another $10,000 to fill in the pool in the backyard. The demolition guy didn't get around to sending a contract, but he said he could get to work right away. So they gave him a 50% deposit, and they are excited to see some progress. Demolition day rolls around, and Brian and Heather show up at the new house at 7 a.m. to do one last walkthrough and snap some photos. A friendly woman walks up, welcomes them to the neighborhood, and introduces herself as Karen, the HOA block captain.
I'm Karen. Hi, Karen.
After asking what they're up to so early in the morning, Karen's demeanor changes. She says it's so sad to see these lovely old homes coming down all over the neighborhood, but she wishes them well and goes on with her morning walk. The excavator and dump truck show up right on time at 9 o'clock. Brian and Heather are beaming with excitement as the excavator tears through the roof and starts loading debris into the truck. A few minutes later, though, a white pickup with a city building department logo on the side pulls up to the curb. A guy with a badge hanging from his neck hops out and introduces himself as the building inspector, and he asked to see their permit. He said he got a call from the HOA this morning. The caller noted there were no HOA or city permits posted on the house. The inspector adds he's noticed a gas meter in the backyard, and that should have been removed because it's a major hazard. So he waves to the demo guy to shut it down and come have a chat. Brian and Heather looked to the demo guy, assuming he pulled the permits. The demo guy said he thought they got the permits. The inspector says, shut it down, and he instructs Brian and Heather to get the needed permits and the HOA approvals and to have the gas meter properly removed. The demo guy is furious because he knows how long it's going to take to get these permits. He mobilized his equipment and started the job, and so he loads up and tells them, find somebody else to finish. What started as a happy and exciting day has now turned to anger and frustration with the demo guy for not pulling permits, worry because this new house now has holes in the roof and walls, and they're just confused as to what other requirements might exist to tear this house down. More than anything, they're just sad that they've made some unfortunate and, let's be honest, stupid mistakes. The demo guy already took a few swings with the excavator before the city shut him down, and so now they're staring at this home which they never intended to live in with big gaping holes in the walls and roof. The demo guy rolled off with no contract, and Brian and Heather are pretty doubtful they're ever going to get their 50% deposit back, which was about $12,500. Right now, they're just fixated on this bright red stop work sticker that the city stuck on the front door before he left. About then, they see some movement across the street. It's their friendly neighborhood Karen peering out of her window. She lives right across the street. Brian is just so mad he can barely form words, and he stammers, I've got to get back to the office. Heather is rattled, but she takes a deep breath. She's a positive person. Surely there's a solution to get out of this hole quickly. She took the day off work already, so she's going to make the most of it and gets busy trying to figure things out. Surely it's just going to take a few phone calls, right? Welcome, everyone, to the Your Project Shepherd podcast. I am your host, Curtis Lawson from Shepherd Construction Advisors. Here at Shepherd, we teach that there are 4 essential components to every successful construction project, and these are illustrated by a simple child's drawing of a house. The foundation is planning, the left wall is your team, the right wall is communication, and the roof protecting it all is proper execution. If you have all 4 of these components, your project will succeed. And that's why we're here, to set you up for success. We will walk you through the right way to go about building a house so that you don't make the same kinds of mistakes that Brian and Heather are making. Even though they are fictional characters that I've created, all their mistakes are based on things that I've seen firsthand during my career. And today on my first podcast is my friend, Susan Brock. And
Hey.
Susan is the owner of Brock and Foster Real Estate. Hey, Susan.
Hey, how are you?
Awesome. I'm so glad you're with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Susan is a licensed real estate broker here in Texas, and she's been in business for how long?
22 years.
Ooh, we've been around a long time.
That's right.
We met each other probably close to 20 years ago.
Yep.
We both lived in the same neighborhood in Southwest Houston. We were both dealing with investment properties and doing remodeling projects,
Yep.
flipping some houses and things like that, right? So Susan, you deal mostly in residential properties, right? Working with buyers and sellers, but you have a strong focus on investment properties.
Yes, that's true.
And you recently, or pretty recently now, I guess it's been a few years, you also started focusing on like sports and entertainment work as well, right?
Yes, we work with a lot of athletes.
Awesome. But you still, I know that you still represent a lot of builders and remodelers, investors, and that sort of thing too, right?
That's right, we do.
So she has a lot of experience, and she has bought and sold a lot of properties for herself personally. So she's well versed in the world of, analyzing values of properties and the investment side of thing, and finding the right properties for new construction or remodeling, and that's why I've got her on here. So thanks again for joining me. So I've gotten the question from a few people when I was planning this podcast, and they said, "Why do you want your first episode to be with a realtor? Because you should start with an architect or builder." And I said, "Well, the first thing that people usually do, even before they go get plans, is they buy a lot or they
Right.
buy a house to tear down. And oftentimes they go into this blindly without the benefit of already having their team in place, which is what Brian and Heather did in the story that we just heard." So here's the easy question to start with. Why should people work with a realtor to buy a lot or a teardown or, acreage for a custom home or whatever?
Sure, absolutely. I think the realtor they're your starting point. So they're going to help you pick the right place and, more importantly, not pick the wrong place. They're going to help you determine longevity. What is the right place for not just right now, but over time. What is the right place for the style of house you want, the size of house you want. Also, with regard to the type of lifestyle you're wanting to lead, what neighborhood best serves that.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll also be able to give you advice on the types of planning that is required in those different areas, give you advice on flood zones, and even homeowners associations to be wary of.
Yeah. And I mean, not every realtor, it's kind of like builders, not all realtors are created equal. Real estate and building are two industries where there's like a very low barrier to entry.
True.
With construction, there's no barrier to entry. You basically print a business card and boom, you're a builder, or don't even do that, right? With real estate, at least there's a licensure process.
Sure.
And even more so to be a broker like yourself. But still, I've been around real estate for quite a long time now, and there's a lot of realtors out there who aren't very qualified.
Sure.
And so just like choosing a builder, I mean, choosing a realtor who knows the market, knows the area that you want to be in, it's really essential.
Absolutely. I do agree with you. I think almost any industry, there is a minimum level of service, and then there's a stellar level of service. And I think especially if you're building a custom home, you're spending, your life savings, you're buying the most expensive thing you probably will ever purchase. It's important to do your research and find someone who really has a high level of skill in being able to find the right lot.
Mm-hmm. In Brian and Heather's case, they went out and bought a for sale by owner property, no realtors involved on either side. So tell me the dangers of doing this. What are the pitfalls of buying a for sale by owner property, especially on your own without experienced representation? I mean, it's one thing to buy one where you have an agent and you're buying it for sale by owner, but no agents on either side. It's kind of a free for all. What are the dangers of that?
So I think the number one danger is that the seller may not properly disclose, and also the seller may lie or may not tell you the truth or the full truth. That would be my first concern. The second concern would be the buyer's lack of understanding of what they should be investigating, what the property diligence process is. They really have no idea.
Yeah.
And if they haven't engaged a builder or an architect, they don't really even know what to ask or to research.
Yeah. I mean, with the internet, everyone's an expert on
Sure.
all things, and especially real estate, it seems,
Right.
and design and building,
Right. I tell my clients, just stay off of Reddit. Just ask me.
Along those lines, I actually had a call from a couple a week or two ago who wanted to meet me about remodeling a house that they already had under contract. They got under contract, this exact situation, no realtors, and they called me and said, hey, we just got this house under contract. They had like $10,000 earnest money they put down. They were already out of their option period, so if they back out, they're not going to get their earnest money back, right? So it was listed with a broker, but they didn't have one. So they called me, and as soon as they gave me the address, I knew it was in the floodplain, and I pulled it up on the flood map just to make sure, on the online FEMA maps, and for sure it was not just in the floodplain, in the floodway, which means it like backs up to a creek basically. And I had to break the news to them that it was impossible for them to do what they wanted to do.
Wow.
Because the city wouldn't allow it, FEMA wouldn't allow it. Now, the seller did disclose that it was in the floodplain, but these guys didn't have anyone on their side telling them what the implications of that were.
Sure.
And so, now they're out $10,000 earnest money. I mean, I'm glad that they called me before they closed on it.
Sure.
Because, once they close on it and they're stuck with a property that they can't build on, they can't remodel. Well, I guess they could build on it, but
that wasn't their intention.
Building a custom home is a lot different than remodeling a 2,000-foot house.
Right.
So I felt bad for them, but at least, we were able to cut their losses at
Sure.
$10,000. But I'm sure that you've seen instances like that where people just bought something where they didn't know what they were buying, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so that could have been avoided if they had called, you, me, somebody up front to be on their team. So, this may be backward from how some people approach it, but I think the best way before you even go out to buy a property is to have at least your core team first. So, have your realtor, have your builder, maybe have the architect too. That way, not only one person is advising you, but you have a team saying, the realtor saying, hey, here's values, here is, like you mentioned, lifestyle-ish, like, what do you want to be close to? What's accessible here? But then you have the architect and I also looking at it saying, this is what you can actually build on this lot based
Sure.
on the setbacks and deed restrictions and whatever. So having those key team members assembled first is really the right way to do it.
Yeah, I think if you have the team first, you can quickly make the decision. And I think that's important because a good lot will go fast. And so you want to be able to, the moment it comes on the market or you identify it as a possibility, you want to be able to say yes or no really quickly. And if you don't have the input from the builder and the architect, you're almost tripping over yourself determining, I don't even know if I can say yes to this or not. And that puts you in a negative position. You might be overlooking a great property. And so I think the key is interview everyone first, and then they can all properly advise you, and you can confidently step once you see the lot.
Yeah. What other common mistakes do you see people making when they're going to buy? I mean, any property really, but particularly
I think in
a lot.
Houston, floodplain is a huge one. I think people don't understand, especially if they're buying an existing shell and they think that they can renovate it. I think that's a big one. Oftentimes when I list a flooded property, I just clearly put it on the remarks, you cannot renovate this.
Yeah, that's smart.
Because I don't want someone to be in a position thinking, oh, I'm buying a great deal. I can flip this and make a ton of money. I don't want them in that situation. And I don't think every broker would necessarily even disclose that.
For sure not.
But I think I think that Houston has some unique challenges around the floodplain. So I think that's the key. Also, I think just design around setbacks and even HOA rules, like Maplewood, for example, keeping the existing footprint of the original structure. I think that's an unusual rule, and that one that not everyone is aware of.
Yeah.
I also think when people look in certain areas, a lot of the neighborhoods are very small. And so on one side of the street, they might have certain rules. The other side of the street might be a new neighborhood,
Oh, for sure.
different rules.
I mean, like there's a neighborhood near here called Meyerland, and Meyerland has like 9 or 10 sections. Every section, and some of them are across the street from each other, every section has its own deed restrictions.
Right. So if you have your plan, I think it's important not to assume. I think assumption is the killer of all good plans.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, like on some streets, you can have a garage facing the front. On some streets, you can't have a garage facing the front. And some streets, you have to have all brick. Some streets, it can be siding. I mean, it's
Right.
it's really crazy. And they are hardcore about enforcing that stuff, too.
Sure. Sure. I think another issue that I believe especially the older city neighborhoods are struggling with is the deed restrictions from the historic neighborhoods are old, and they do not yet address the new situations that we have, like accessory dwelling units, home offices, extra parking, Airbnb, solar panels, all these things that people are wanting on their new homes. The deed restrictions don't fully or adequately address. And I think as new construction becomes more and more needed just because of functional obsolescence, those deed restrictions need to have updates.
Yeah.
And that's an arduous process.
Yeah. And even some of those neighborhoods don't have HOAs that actually enforce things. I mean, some of them are very hardcore, and some of them don't actually enforce the stuff that's in place even. So you have to know what you're getting into for sure when it comes to all that kind of stuff. And we don't have some of these issues like some states do, because I know people will hopefully be listening to this from around the country, or around the world, right? But, like California, you deal with fault lines. Other places, you deal with different issues like that. Actually, here in Houston, you deal with some fault lines too. There's several fault lines that run through Houston that people have no clue they're there.
Just in Willow Meadows.
Yeah, and over in Spring Branch, there's a couple big ones, the Long Point Fault. And I've walked into some of those houses where there's a big old crack running right through the middle of the house.
Right.
And guess what? You can't build on that. I mean, I guess you can, but it's not smart.
Right.
So other than common mistakes, what there's a certain kind of person I think that should or shouldn't maybe even go through this process. And I've got my opinions, but I plan on asking all my guests that are coming on the show, in your opinion, what kind of person probably shouldn't even go through this? They should maybe just go buy a house that's already built out in the suburbs, or go buy an existing house in town and just love it instead of trying to go through this.
I think someone that has a deadline should not build.
Yeah.
If you've got a deadline, you should not build. If you have a health condition that is affected by stress, you should not build. I want to say people that are control freaks or type A personalities should not build, but I also feel like those are the ones that like to build.
Oh, yeah.
I think that it is important for them to have a shepherd. I really do think that oftentimes my clients included, might be doing it on their own. And, I always tell them I'm here as a sounding board. I know you have your builder, you have your architect, you have your dad, you have each other. But if you get into a pinch, I'm always happy to hear it out. But oftentimes I find them getting in the weeds about issues that are easily solvable almost, in my opinion. But they are struggling in such a difficult manner with problems in the build process. I can definitely see it's important to have somebody else managing with them.
Yeah.
And I do think it's, even with a new construction, if you go to a big name builder, a national builder, if you start from scratch and go to the design center, it is 8 hours of 1,000 decisions.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not for the weak. And I do think it is probably the most decision-laden thing you'll ever do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a compact process. If you have a child, you're making decisions for them over 18 years. But if you're building a house, you're making decisions for every single light switch location, bath fixture, the thickness of the tile grout. I mean, it's just too many decisions
Right.
almost within a very short period of time with a lot of demand. And I think that for even a normal person, that's pretty overwhelming. And I don't think they fully realize when they enter the process how detailed it is.
Right. And if you have the wrong team, it can get even more overwhelming. That's why we say, other than the planning, the first two walls of our structure are really kind of the same thing, planning and team.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the wrong people in place, it's going to make that process even harder.
Yeah.
I think that aside from control freaks, which you're right, a lot of control freaks do enter into the process, and that's unavoidable. So we do deal with that. But I just think people who think they can go it alone, people that they think that they can make all the decisions on their own.
Yeah.
Because again, the internet, everybody knows everything.
Sure.
They're like, oh, I can figure this out. I mean,
right.
I
think like that concept years ago, it was like somehow you could build your own house with a company. I thought that was a terrible idea. Just an awful idea.
That's definitely still around. In fact, some of my clients for Shepherd are people who are building their own house, and they kind of get too much into the weeds, start having some issues, and they hire us to help straighten it out. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of people that still do that self-building thing.
Right.
So if you are dead set on doing that, okay, but at least hire somebody like me to come alongside you and help you through some of those decisions, because there's a lot of them.
Sure. I think also they can make poor decisions that will affect resale value. And unless you're going to die in that thing, you're probably going to sell it. Mm-hmm. Like studies show that most people will sell within 7 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And that red backsplash, that shag green avocado carpet, that drop ceiling with the black, metal design that you love. It's not going to resell. It's not going to help your bottom line. It's probably not something you're going to want to pay to change.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes they're just not thinking that all the way through as an asset that could create value.
Yeah.
And so even some of those decisions could be made better by a helper.
Mm-hmm. And most people come to us saying, oh, this is my forever home. I hear the words forever home multiple times a week. But in reality, like you said, it's like 5 to 7 years is pretty common, even for a quote unquote forever home.
Sure.
I mean, we've done huge projects for people that this is my forever home. And then I see the house pop up on the MLS 2 years later, and I call them. I'm like, hey, why are you selling your forever home? Oh, we decided to move to Austin. Oh, okay, well.
Sure.
And guess what? They're building their forever home there now. So on the flip side of kind of who shouldn't go through this process, you got somebody that's like your dream client, your ideal client from the realtor side?
I think the best person to build is somebody who's already owned a home. I think that you need to own a home first. I think that's the best candidate because they've already kind of experienced from an ownership perspective what they like, what they don't, what they need, what they don't need, what's important to them as they grow. I think a renter is just not looking at their space from that perspective. They're not really analyzing that apartment or that rental house very strongly. And so I do think a first-time owner is a better build candidate.
Mm-hmm.
I also think someone who has thought it through, maybe not in a rush, is a good candidate. I also think someone who's not a penny pincher is a good candidate. If you are looking to do everything cheaply or on a budget, I think maybe you should just go buy an inventory home from a nationwide builder.
Definitely. Yeah. I think one of the most important things that people have to have when they go into the process, and it's the first question that we ask, is budget. So you have to go into it with a realistic budget. And not only that, you have to be honest about that budget with your whole team. The realtor's got to know a realistic budget. The builder's got to know. The architect's got to know. Because if we don't know, I mean, we're going to be barking up the wrong tree. Like, I don't want to design or go through the design process with somebody only to find out that, what they wanted does not actually fit their budget.
Sure.
I think people try to play that close to the vest, like they're scared to be honest about their finances because they're scared of being taken advantage of.
Right.
But we as professionals can't do our job if they're not transparent with us. It's probably a little bit less common for realtors.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
I have even clients that'll say, "Oh, anything. I can buy anything." And some of my clients, Curtis, honestly, they probably could buy anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to say, well, I mean, is that 5 million? Is that 10 million? Is that, I'm just throwing numbers now. Like, What does that look like? Or then is it a monthly? Is your mortgage payment 10,000? Is it 20,000? Like, is it 50,000? Like, what? I mean, what is it? There has to be a limit.
Yeah.
Because anything is so vast, I'm not going to be able to help you. It's like going to the Galleria and just saying, you have 30 minutes, put your favorite outfit in the cart. It just, I mean, where would you go?
Right.
Like, you would go nowhere. You would know you would know where to go left or right. So you have to establish a budget. And I think it's important, to build trust. And that's when they start to tell you. And if they don't understand, I need to know the numbers so that I know if we're picking onyx or formica, then it starts to be a more real and helpful conversation.
Yeah. The flip side of that is people who are either they are penny pinchers or they don't have a realistic budget, meaning it's not a good enough budget for what they want to do. Mm-hmm. They'll sometimes they'll make bad decisions to try to keep it in their budget. So they'll go buy like a subpar lot to build the house on. Mm-hmm. They'll buy like the worst lot in the neighborhood just because it's cheap.
Right.
Because they think that'll allow them to put more into the house. But what are the three? What are the three most important things in real estate?
Location.
Location, right?
Yeah.
So what happens when you have like the most expensive house in a crappy neighborhood, or you're in a good neighborhood, but it's the worst lot in the neighborhood? What happens in that case?
Right, right. Well, if you're in a down market, which is what I'm always advising, like anybody can sell a house. Like in the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, you didn't even have to be good. You just had to have a for sale sign in your yard, and you were sold. Your realtor really didn't have to have much talent.
Nope.
I mean, if they did have talent, now they might be able to get you $50,000 more dollars or $100,000 more dollars. But it was like a talent-free zone for a little bit there.
Mm-hmm.
Sold. But in a down market, that's what I'm forecasting. Look, I'm helping you buy this now in advance, thinking for a down market. Does it make sense in a down market? If it does, then we're okay.
Yeah.
But if you could be in a negative position in 7 years because you bought this terrible lot, and you put this castle on it, I've got to tell you no.
Yeah, it's the old hope for the best and plan for the worst, right?
Yes, totally. I tell people all the time, you're hiring me to think through worst case scenario. I mean, that's my job.
Yeah. And so there's another related problem that I see with that, and I'm sure that some of my other guests in the future will dive deep on this. But those same people will often choose the cheapest builder, the cheapest designer, and so now they're compounding their problem because you got a crappy lot with a crappy house and a crappy design.
Sure.
But then they'll like pick super high-end finishes to go in that house.
Right.
So you got the worst house, but you got the Wolf appliances.
Right.
And you've really just got a pig with lipstick on it.
Right. It's a mismatch.
Yeah. And so that's a problem both for resale, and it's a problem a lot of times just for living in the house because, let's face it, you buy the house that was poorly built, poorly designed, you're likely going to have some issues with the house, both, whether it's repairs or, energy bills or just problems with it. And so, you're going to incur, costs that you would have not had you spent a little bit more up front and
Right.
made some good decisions.
Right.
Yeah. Have you ever seen any situations that have just like gone downhill, like any bad projects, any anecdotes that you could share with us?
I think one that comes to mind is just where they were really trying to save, and the project stalled, I think, too long in trying to find the cheapest builder out there. And in trying to find the cheapest builder out there, really, they realized there really wasn't a good cheap builder.
Mm-hmm.
So the project stalled. Interest rates went up and up. So then by the time they found the builder they picked ended up being one of the original suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
But now the loan is at a higher rate. And the project is done later. And I think had they gone with the original suggestion, they could have captured, probably half the interest rate that they'll end up closing at.
Yeah, and that's a huge difference in your mortgage payment.
Yeah, and especially with the size of the house. But I think part of that is lack of trust in the process and always searching for that greener grass. But there are not a ton of builders, custom builders that are affordable
Right.
in Houston at all.
Right.
And so I don't know, I think analysis paralysis on that one, but there's a cost. There's just a cost to waiting. There's a cost to delaying your decisions. And I think in that case, their house probably cost them $100,000 more in the long run, maybe more with that interest.
Yeah.
So I think that was a negative scenario. I've had people end up buying a lot and never building because they couldn't put what they thought
Yeah.
their dream was. Now, I was not representing them, but
Yeah.
They bought from us with no agent, and I've never seen anything happen. And
Yeah, sometimes you see those properties come back on the market a year later.
Right.
Hey, the sign's back up. They never did anything.
And sometimes I'll go and check, and I think, wow, they're selling it for less than they bought it for. I just hate to see that.
Yeah.
Because it's an extra loss because they're paying commissions to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I hope people will take something good away from this discussion and avoid those same mistakes.
Yeah.
I think at the root of it, the message is just, have a good team, build your team early, don't try to go it alone.
Yeah.
My hope is that we would help somebody make a better decision in this process.
Yeah. I think one of the keys for me on the build process is you have to start from the end before you even start the demo. You have to get all the way to the end of the finished product. I want to see the full photograph in my mind before we swing a hammer. Mm-hmm. I want to see the mailbox. I want to see the walkway. I want to see the kids running across the grass. I want to see how it all comes together on the front elevation. How are the kids interacting in the playroom? What is the exchange of the husband and the wife in the bathroom area? Where are the dirty clothes going? Like, what is it all going to be? I want to make sure before we start, is that all working? You know? And then advance 5 years in the future. When all the kids are in sports, where is all that stuff going to go? When all the kids are driving, where are all the cars going? You know, as that family evolves, does it still work? And if that photograph isn't advancing with this $1 million project or $2 million, 500,000, whatever they're spending,
Right.
if it isn't working, I want to fix it before we swing the hammer.
Yeah.
And I think too often when I see a project that hasn't been all the way thought through, there's just something off. You know, when I see the finished design or see it in process, I'm like, why did they do the gate like that? Or why is the sidewalk so skinny? Why did they put the mailbox that way? Why did they pick this staircase? You know, why are the windows this way? It's little things that somebody didn't think all the way through. They just kind of rushed it.
Yeah.
Or didn't give it a once over, or didn't take it through design one more time. And I feel like if they would just have one more set of eyes, look at it, make sure, is this it?
Right.
And most importantly for us, can we resell it?
Yeah.
In 10 days or less? That's always my goal.
Yeah.
What would it take to give it that 1% edge over its competitors in a down market?
In a down market, the best property will always sell first.
Right.
Period.
Right. So what does that take? You know, can I check off some boxes with some smart home technology, or could I just put a little bit of edginess around the home media equipment, or, you know,
Right.
some little change in the plan before we hit go?
Yeah. I love that. I love visualizing the end product, you know, visualizing how it's going to be used, and then you create the process to get there. You have to start with the long-term vision first and then say, okay, how are we going to achieve this now?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the first things that we do in a new home project is we have a vision questionnaire, and it's really long, a lot of pages, but it's lifestyle questions. How are you going to, you know, who's living in the house? Who might live in the house? How do you use the rooms? What do you like to spend your time doing? So it's kind of getting into that client's head and extracting from them what they may not be able to verbalize even, and saying, hey, this is the dream, this is how we want to do it, and then let's step back and say, okay, what are the steps to achieve that?
Right.
So
Yeah.
got to start there. So like I said, I hope that we can save somebody some heartache in their process, make some good decisions. Like I said at the beginning of the show, our aim is to be the guide for the process, and they should definitely call a qualified realtor like Susan to be their guide through the purchase process.
Absolutely.
And their partner long term, because I know that you're great at keeping in touch with your clients, you know, while they're living in the house. You know, you're not going to just say bye-bye once you get your commission and
No,
and
I tell them this is just the beginning. So
yeah, I mean, you're a long-term partner as well. You know, a guide has to be somebody who's been there, right? You're not going to hire somebody to take you on a trek through the Sahara that's only been to El Paso. You know, the guide has to be somebody who's been through the things that they're going to take you through. And so, you know, having a Susan on your team is indispensable. So, well, I think that's going to wrap up our discussion for today.
awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you joining me to talk about site selection and navigating this process. I'm really thankful for your friendship over the years and your business with us. Tell people how they can get in touch with you if they want to have a great realtor.
Absolutely. BrockandFoster.com. And we're on Facebook, Instagram, everywhere you can find us on the internet.
And Susan's great on social media. In fact, she's helped me kind of up my social media game too.
That's right. You can check him out on Reels, guys.
That's right. She's very active. She's teaching me some things. So thank you all for joining us on this very first episode of the Your Project Shepherd podcast. And again, we teach that every successful project has 4 key components. And these are represented by a very simple drawing of a house. The line on the bottom, the foundation, is planning. The left wall is your team. The right wall is communication. And the roof is proper execution. Have all 4 of those components and your project will succeed. Join us next week. We're going to discuss the design process, and we'll see how things develop for our friends Brian and Heather. Hopefully they can get their act together, get their project going in the right direction, but something tells me their struggles probably are not over. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.